Wonderful. Well, thank you everybody for gathering today. My name is Ashley Anthony. I'm very gracious to welcome you to our Innovation Speaker Series with David Saltman. Of course, I'm very grateful to be able to host as well. And our mission here at the Atlantic Canada Climate Network is to connect folks working on climate action within Atlantic Canada to center justice, collaborate effectively, and leverage available resources and capacity efficiently as we reduce emissions and respond to climate change impacts. Addressing climate change is increasingly important to the health and well being of our community and our planet. Over time, we've noticed different organizations experiencing the same needs, barriers, successes, and more. But without a convenient, ongoing communication channel between climate champions, we risk limiting ourselves to disjointed, incremental changes. So, our goal here is to reduce barriers and create collaboration across Atlantic Canada. We aim to critique dominant ways of knowing, thinking, and doing, and bring in new perspectives, engagement methodologies, voices, worldviews, and opportunities for education to all Atlantic Canadians. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are connecting today on the unceded traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqiyik, Passamaquoddy, and Penobscot and Abenaki nations, or the Wabanaki Confederacy, as well as Innu and Inuit peoples. Now, these territories are covered by treaties of peace and friendship, which the nations first signed in with the British Crown in 1726. Now, these treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. So it's in this spirit of peace and friendship that I greet you today. And of course, David Saltman, like this, if you've ever Googled him, you will know that this is an incredible opportunity to hear from him. He's a successful executive, a clean tech entrepreneur, and a leading advocate of environmental innovation and sustainable business development. He is currently the chairman and CEO of INCA Renewable Technologies. Now, INCA's mission is to be a world leader in development, commercialization, and manufacturing of innovative bio-composite materials for a wide range of industrial applications. Their development partners include, and these are no little names, Toyota, Genesis, Winnebago, and Gurit. Now, prior to moving to Canada, he was actually the chairman and CEO of Malama Composites. They're manufacturers of rigid urethane foams made from non toxic bio based resources. The products were used in everything from boat hulls to wind turbine blades, Hollywood movie sets to medical devices. They received many awards, including the most innovative green product of the year from the Society of Plastics Engineers. Formerly, Saltman was the CEO of Open Energy Corporation, the creators of the first building integrated photovoltaic roofing tiles and roofing membranes. Open Energy created the solar glass atrium surrounding the Academy of Science Museum in San Francisco, designed by Renzo Piano. Prior to this, he actually served as a CMO for FlexForm Technologies, the first natural fiber composite company in North America. FlexForm's products enabled engineers like at Ford, GM, Chrysler, and Tesla to produce automotive interiors that are stronger, lighter, and far more easily recyclable than glass reinforced plastics. And of course, he also served on the Presidential Task Force for the development of green procurement guidelines for the U.S. government, which is huge. He's received awards from the American Marketing Association, the National Recycling Coalition, and the American Composites Manufacturing Association. He is also the co-founder of cleantech San Diego and served as executive director to the Surfrider Foundation, which won the largest Clean Water Act lawsuit in U.S. history. Saltman is a graduate of UCLA School of Theater, Film, and Television, and was actually the co-founder of E-Entertainment Network, which was sold to Time Warner before he embarked on his clean tech career. So without further ado, I hand it over to our esteemed guest today, David Saltman. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, Ashley, that's one of the best introductions, most articulate ones I've ever heard. And your pronunciation of First Nations language is astoundingly good. I mean, I really have nothing more to say. But no, seriously, since we are definitely among friends, it's great to see Jason on, one of the leaders as well in terms of composite materials and epoxies made of bio-based materials. It's just phenomenal to see all of you. Rosalind and I worked hard on the Sustainability Leadership Council, and Rosalind is obviously really one of my friends and co-mentors. I guess I would start by saying that I don't believe that there's any sort of single solution to slowing climate change. No magic bullet, no coherent plan, I think, for the adaptation that we're going to see over these next number of years. Absolutely, we have to stop burning fossil fuels. We have to basically stop burning. We have to deploy green technologies, all of them that are at our disposal, whether that's wind or solar or geothermal generation. But I think we have to deploy better sustainable agricultural practices. We have to make better energy efficient buildings. But I think most importantly, we have to preserve the precious ecosystems upon which all life it depends. And I think these are all commonalities that we share. I think also as activists, we have to push back on the powerful forces that are actively denying science and continue to exploit natural resources at tremendous cost to human and species and to habitat. You know, only last week, I don't know if you saw the news, but lawyers and Washington politicians basically managed to eviscerate the environmental, social, and governance initiatives that corporations had put in place to promote better practices within them. So JP Morgan, State Street, and BlackRock, three of the largest investment funds on earth, basically pulled out of climate action 100 plus programs and their commitment to making ESG part of their investment criteria. So I think we have roles to play on very high levels, as well as our immediate own lifestyle and living choices. But I'm here to also say that all is not, doom and gloom. I'm a big believer that the environment is too important to simply be a charity. And I really believe and have lived a life where business and industry have a significant role to play in saving the planet. You know, economy and ecology share this root, eco, meaning, home or earth. So I've spent the last 3 decades trying to develop businesses that can be both economically viable and obviously environmentally sustainable. And several of these companies, some of my focus primarily has been in the building materials sector. And that's because the built environment consumes 50% of all natural resources and generates about 42% of all greenhouse gas emissions. So for me, it seemed like a good place to start. And the basis of my work has primarily been that many of the objects that surround you that are made of petroleum-derived hydrocarbon molecules can just as easily be built out of carbohydrates derived from plants. And in so doing this, these bio-based materials actually sequester rather than generate carbon. They're far less toxic to the environment. They break down in the environment, and they're much more easy to either recover and recycle or actually to compost at the end of their useful lives. So that's been an endeavor for the last couple of decades for me. Our latest venture, as Ashley so articulately described, is INCA Renewable Technologies. And in this venture, what we intend to do is purchase the biomass, the waste stocks of hemp that has been grown in the Canadian prairie for the last 20 years for plant-based protein, so that this isn't cannabis. It's not CBD. It's actually grown for hemp hearts and hemp cereal and emollients and oils. As Jason knows, those oils can actually, from that seed, can actually be used to make bio-based epoxies. What our role is in this is that we basically have developed and patented a number of very unique natural fiber composites that can be made from this sustainable material. And then we've developed, engineered these facilities. And as Ashley said, we've secured major commercialization partners for each of our products. We've also been awarded recently a $10 million grant from Emissions Reduction Alberta under their circular economy program. That's contingent on us raising our next round of capital. But what's exciting for me personally is that our products will directly replace glass reinforced plastics in automotive interiors, enabling the manufacturing of lighter, safer, and far more easily recycled vehicle interiors. And our bio panels will replace rainforest plywood, which is currently being cut down in Borneo, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brazil, that uses hardwood plywood to make motorhome sidewalls. So we will directly lessen damage from cutting down forests to make motorhome sidewalls. By the way, just in Elkhart, Indiana alone, the home of RV manufacturing, they use 600 million board feet of plywood to make RVs. So it's a significant impact that we're going to have there. And our BioCore material, which is a very strong, lightweight core material made from the center of the hemp plant called hurd, a very lightweight, almost like cork-like material, that we will pulp and extrude and will make a direct replacement for the balsa wood that's currently being used in wind turbine blades and boats and other applications. So our factories will generate zero waste, water, or air pollution. Our products are non-toxic and, as I said, resource efficient and recyclable. And over the course, just to give you a sense of the significance of hemp as a cultivar, about 45% of the big bale of hemp that comes into our factory to be processed is carbon. And so when we make biocomposites out of that carbon, we sequester all of it. And then when we recycle that material, we sequester it forever. So for us, over the course of the first 5 years of INCA's existence in the Canadian prairie, we will sequester over 0.5 gigaton of carbon, fairly significant. So, you know, again, the last thing I would say about hemp as a crop is that when the farmer grows hemp for seed and sells that grain, and then we come along and purchase that remaining biomass for composites, that dual income for the farming community makes hemp one of the most profitable crops in the prairie. And so we don't want to take away from the food chain. We, as an environmental company, we support plant-based protein. So we promote both the growing of plant-based protein, healthier ways of living, certainly much less environmentally impactful than other forms of protein. And then we also then make the materials that will become automotive wind turbine blades, you know, all kinds of other cool products. So I really support as a human and as a leader, I guess, all kinds of products and projects and initiatives that are really restorative rather than extractive in nature, ones that capture rather than generate carbon. And I think as investors and consumers, as advocates, all of them deserve our consideration. And so I see INCA as just playing a role in creating replicable models that can be taken around the world to do things in a less negatively impactful way, and hopefully start the ball rolling around industry to make the change. I will tell you that our customers are completely committed. The initiative at Toyota, which drove our development of these automotive prepregs for them, was their Vision 2030 and Vision 2050 programs to become carbon net neutral. So at Gurit, they were actively seeking an alternative to balsa wood, which has been cut down out of the Ecuadorian forests now, and obviously to the detriment of those rainforests. The industry is moving, despite a lot of the pushback you see. It's already embracing these sustainable practices, and I think that's good for all of us. So I think with that, you guys, I'd rather just open it up and answer questions you may have and cover all the things I probably forgot.
At this point, we can have a fluid conversation if anybody would like to unmute and has questions for David. I know that I have a list of them.
Good. I would expect that, Ashley, out of you.
Yeah, like first off the top for me, obviously, we share the same almost journey into sustainability. You are doing very much different things than I am. But for me, what was that inspiration to shift from media and like journalism and film and television into like full blown straight up sustainability?
Yeah, that's a completely fair question. I've always, as a surfer growing up in Southern California, I always considered myself to be an endangered marine mammal. And so I very much identified with my ocean environment, was very sensitive to it, and shared in the joys of what it is to free dive living reefs and just be part of the ocean environment and of the world environment. When I was in the entertainment industry, I was working to build the entertainment channel, but we were starting to have children, babies, and I was less and less liking living in the world of entertainment, especially trying to raise a healthy family. But I was more and more loving the work I was doing for Surfrider Foundation as a volunteer, really, to preserve our ocean environment. And so when we did manage to exit E-Entertainment, we sold that to Time Inc. and Warner Communications when they were merging. That enabled me the opportunity to really go into the environmental field or clean tech field, as it's now called. And our first project was actually, we took corrugated cardboard, old OCC, old corrugated cardboard fiber. We ground that up and we made high-tech honeycomb panels for industry. It became a real big hit for all the exhibit builders, the trade show exhibit builders, because it was a very lightweight substitute for plywood in that construction. And then I went on to do other projects. And I guess, Ashley, I've always had a passion for building companies. That's something that I really love to do. And so my feeling is I'm best served coming up with these crazy ideas, gathering up teams, forming the capital that's required, launching business, and then my tension tends to, after 3 or 4 years, like go, okay, this is up. There's great people to run this, on to the next. And that's why there's sort of been a series of different projects. When I teamed up a, a number of years ago with a gentleman named Gary Balthus,
I
who
know.
was he was really
Right?
the godfather of natural fiber composites. And Gary and I traveled to Europe in the early 90s and realized that these very strong recycling laws that were happening in Europe necessitated recycling cars. And they could do lots with the steel, and they can even do lots with rubber and tires. But all the plastics that sat inside automobiles, your seat backs or headliners, your dashboards, your package trays, all the plastic inside your car, those were all plastic polymers, primarily polypropylene and polyethylene, reinforced with glass fiber to make them stronger, more resilient. And glass obviously takes a lot of energy to make. All the polymers were petroleum based, but more importantly, glass is very heavy. And so these automobiles were heavier, but the whole move towards auto efficiency and now to EV is to remove that weight. So by replacing glass reinforced plastics with natural fiber, we reduce the amount of petroleum used in that interior by 50%, a big significant number. And we made lighter, more resilient automotive interiors. And they were cheaper. So it was a pretty easy adoption at FlexForm. That company, by the way, is still up and running and selling to GM and Chrysler, now Tesla, BMW, et cetera. So these companies go on. INCA is different, significantly different. And that is that in flex form and then at Carver nonwoven technologies, we were always reliant on imported fiber from Southeast Asia. So we were actually importing flax or jute or kanaf from Southeast Asia at about 80 cents a pound. So it's expensive, it's as expensive as glass fiber. Because at INCA, we are going to become vertically integrated. We're going to actually process our own fiber from this waste stream of hemp production, hemp seed production. We not only can make additional types of products, some really exciting products from that hemp resource, but it also reduces our raw material costs from 80 cents to 8 cents a pound. So pretty significant from a business perspective. So that's when I say sustainability has to be both economic and environmental. And so I see a tremendous opportunity. I'm also a big believer as a Californian who moved to Canada and now recently became a Canadian citizen as well. I'm a real big believer that Canada has to shift out of a purely resource-focused economy and do a lot of the value-added manufacturing here. And so this is also an opportunity to really promote the industrial sector along with the agricultural sector and start becoming more sufficient, self-sufficient and self-directed and less dependent on either, natural resource extraction and sale. Shift that focus and make all of the products here.
I think that anybody that works in steel, forestry, any of the products that we, extract here, sell down to the States and buy for a higher price can definitely understand what you're saying. Can you walk us through the key steps in that manufacturing process, like with the bio-composite material that INCA works with?
Sure. So basically, as I described to you, these big bales of hemp, these are 1,000-pound bales. You've seen them sitting in fields across the prairie. Those get trucked to our facility where we open up those bales and we spread them down what's called the decortication line. These are big, long, over 150-meter long operations. And they essentially first crush that hemp so that in crushing it, it starts to separate the long outer bast fiber, this long textile fiber, from the short inner core of the hemp plant. We want to utilize 100% of what comes into our factory. So what we do is we strip off that outer fiber, and then we further refine that to a textile grade, something that you could think of as a woven, like literally like linen fiber, okay, or cotton fiber. It looks more like that. The beauty of hemp is it's a very strong natural fiber. In fact, it's the strongest natural fiber on earth. So it makes fantastic automotive prepregs or panels for the RV industry. So like what I mean by that is, so this weird looking board right there, that's actually over 50% hemp. And this board is made with a polymer so that when you heat it up in a press at Toyota or Ford or GM or Chrysler or BMW or Volvo, and you put that in a press and you form that into a 3D object, let's say it's a door panel, then when that press opens up, you have a rigid panel that then can be cover stocked, et cetera. So that's what an automotive prepreg is. But also the remaining material, that inner hemp core or hurd, we've developed and patented a methodology to essentially pulp that, like paper making, pulp it, dry it through radio frequency oven, and then put it down a press line to make a panel. And that hard panel that kind of looks like particle board is 1/3 the weight of particle board and is stronger than balsa wood. So that's why they're freaking out. Like IKEA, when we had a great time at the Paris World Composite Show, JEC World Composite Show, and fortunately INCA won Best New Products Award there last year. IKEA came up and said, do you know what it would mean to us to take out all the weight of our furniture? You know, everyone loves our furniture, but what's everyone's biggest complaint is it weighs a ton. You get a hernia getting your kid's bookshelf up the stairs. So it's a real, a fantastic product for a number of applications. So to make a long story short, we take that big bale, we separate out the components, and then we very carefully make specific products out of what's remaining. Now, interestingly enough, when we get the long fiber out and we take the hurd out, we still have a lot of very short fiber left. This fiber is about 4 to 7 millimeters in length. It has aspect ratios, meaning the ratio between its length and its diameter are 15:1, which is very significant because that's what you use as glass fiber to reinforce injection plastics. So we replace injection plastic, right, with natural fiber, injection molded, and we made all these weird things like knives, forks, and spoons. That's made, these things are 100% biocompostable. So this is made not with a petroleum resin, but with what's called PHA. It's actually a starch-based polymer that Jason is very familiar with. And we reinforced it with our very short, fine fibers, and we injection molded these utensils because Canada and Europe have outlawed single-use plastics that won't break down in the environment. So there's the solution. So we actually tripled the tensile strength of the polymer, the base polymer, that PHA, and we reduced the cost of that part by 40%. So those are the things that we've been working on and kind of getting ready to launch on a commercial scale.
This is anybody have, and yes, please, Rosalind, because I have other questions.
Yeah,
Please,
I
if you
know
would
so
like.
many. One of the things that comes to mind is the doubling down on the savings of emissions when you put it into a vehicle. Like I could see the application in airplanes, for example, you know, just something that's lighter is not going to expend as much emissions. But David, I know you're a big picture guy, and I'm going to ask you a big picture kind of question. My name's Rosalind Warner. By the way, I'm on the board of the Canadian Environmental Network. We're a national environmental organization. Again, like David, very much the volunteer part of my life is what gives me my enthusiasm for environmental issues. We're partnering with the Atlantic Canada Climate Network on this series, which has been amazing. We've heard from some incredible new innovations. But you know, we're living in the old economy, kind of reaching for the new economy, right? And there's so many vested interests in that old economy. And when you look back on it, you see from the 1940s and 1950s, that old economy was built kind of on a falsity, which is that we can, you know, continue to grow and grow and grow and just dispose and emit and produce pollution that doesn't impose a cost. And I think what we're seeing now is that we need to kind of recognize the cost of that old economy. And politically, though, I mean, there's still so many interests that are invested in that old economy, and sort of a bit of a deception in a way that it's cheaper, right? That it's more economic, that somehow burning coal is cheaper or more efficient, or that if we try to move to a clean economy, everything will cost more. And, you know, people are very sensitive to inflation right now. And it's almost like the elements of the new economy, which can solve a lot of the problems and do it better, you know, do it better than the old economy, is that we're so conditioned by that old economy to think in those terms, you know, that pollution is free and that we can emit without cost. I guess my question is, like, David, you're one of the few people that can speak business and that can actually, you know, say here's why we need to change, and here's the business case. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit to what you see in that new economy that the folks in the old economy are missing. What does that transformation mean? And how can we move towards it?
Well, there's a lot there, and boy, there's probably a million answers. But among other things, Rosalind, what you said is very true, and it's actually at the core of how I evaluate creating projects, if you will, or companies. And that is, you can be better, stronger, lighter, greener, but if you're not cost competitive, you got to pass. So what's amazing about these bio-based materials is that they have all those other features and can be cost competitive. It's at the heart of what we do. So that's a very important model. Now, listen, we're up against oil, which has had 100 years of ability to scale production. I mean, when it makes polymers, remember, when it takes that industry takes a barrel of oil and it pours it into the top of a refinery, they're stripping out jet fuel, then automotive fuel, and then diesel fuel, then ethylenes, propylenes, all the precursors of plastics. And when they finally get down to the very bottom of that refinery, you know what's there? Something so toxic that we spray it on our foods and call it Agent Orange. I kid you not. That's where, you know, all the herbicides and pesticides. So I say that about that analogy because that vertical integration allows tremendous, not only economies of scale, but obviously ability to cost at very low numbers. So it is a serious challenge. So I took, at INCA, I took that model of vertical integration. I said, well, what if we pour in a bale of hemp? What if we process it ourselves? And what does it mean if, as we strip off all of the value so that we have a zero waste facility? In fact, we even use the moisture coming off the field to humidify the building. You actually capture moisture. So I look at some of those old school analogies and say, how can we be better, more competitive? Now, in terms of the cost of saving the planet, we do have to start to value natural ecosystems. It's critical. They can play a major role in flood mitigation, far cheaper than building culverts and concrete and running water into, you know, polluting water as you go and then running it into your drinking system, you know, like your lakes and your oceans. We can utilize nature in much more effective ways. We can protect nature in much more effective ways. The other thing is, as you know, we can learn from indigenous first world native peoples on how they live sustainably so that these open systems, these more imbalanced systems, far more sustainable systems, we can incorporate some of that in our own ways of living and certainly preservation. And also, for me, fundamentally, to your question, it's about raising consciousness. It's about people recognizing the costs of, you know, polluting systems on their own lives, on their kids' lives, on the fact that now all of us are filled with plastics, plasticizers that are, you know, affecting endocrine systems, et cetera, et cetera. That goes on. So I think the species has to evolve, or we're not going to be here. I think it really is. We as individuals are an incredible species. As individuals, I mean, look at all that people have invented and accomplished and created art around and created music around. Incredible. As an entire species, not so much. You know, like, been very harmful to the environment from way back when. So I think that consciousness, awareness plays a big part in it. I think the good news is most people consider themselves to be environmentally conscious now. Most people want a healthy planet, right? So it really is overcoming the bad guys, overcoming this distorted, dystopian view of the world, which is an extractive one, which is that, you know, natural resources are only valued at the cost of that extraction, not at their impact, and that there's no comeuppance in terms of doing things the right way, pricing goodness into the deal. But there are a lot of people now who are creating very interesting technologies. For example, I mean, solar is the easiest one. Solar and wind are now cheaper than coal, and they're cost competitive with natural gas. So hell yes, you know, distributed generation everywhere all the time, you know. There are future technologies, Rosalind, that I think will come out shortly that will be important, but I try not to stress things that people then treat as a magic bullet, an excuse for doing the wrong stuff. I think you are going to see some real advances in solar, much more efficient, by the way. You're going to see some real advances in storage, distributed energy storage, and quite possibly in nuclear fusion, which is a big debate around among us environmentalists. But seriously, if unlike fission, if you can not generate a lot of waste, and if you can encapsulate and make that work, all of us have watched Star Wars from the very beginning. We believe it's possible. It's just not so easy to contain. But I think people are starting. It's just a way of saying I think there's lots of things, and there's a lot of industries that are moving. I mean, the building materials industry, you guys, is moving very quickly. Now, how we make residential housing is terrible, but how we're starting to construct buildings now is far more energy efficient and resource efficient, much lighter, much faster to construct. Affordable housing is completely within our grasp. It's just the will to do it. I mean, absolutely.
So my next
I don't know.
question is, no, this is perfect. And I'm kind of following up from everything that you've said. So how does the collaboration with product development partners like Toyota and Genesis and Winnebago and Gurit, how does that influence the manufacturing commercialization of bio-composite materials?
Great question. So what we tend to do, we don't go out and invent things and then try to push them into industry. We work with industry partners to solve their problems. So in the case of, for example, Toyota, they had a goal of taking part weights down from 1,400 grams per square meter to 1,200 grams per square meter without any loss of strength. That was their challenge to their tier one suppliers, to their material suppliers. And they wanted to do it without waste on the factory floor. And so we went to work on a new way of making these non-woven materials, that silly little panel that I showed you, in ways that we could lay down more fiber in multiple layers down this manufacturing line in an XYZ orientation. So it sort of goes from particle board weight to plywood weight, strength. I mean, it really multiplies your weight by doing that. And then we spent a lot of time and a lot of money then doing full line trials in Europe and in North America to manufacture it. And then we delivered those parts to them. And then they test them and they make adjustments and we go back. So it's very much how it works. For example, that bio-balsa product, that replacement for balsa wood, we worked with Gurit. Their goal was they wanted a 10-pound per cubic foot weight, similar as balsa wood. They wanted higher compressive strength. And the last problem that we have to solve is they don't want too much resin uptake. So when you make a wind turbine blade, these are enormous, right? 100-meter long blades. And you can imagine how much stress is occurring at the base of that where it hooks into the turbine itself. I mean, it is insane. It's traveling 100 miles an hour in different wind conditions, et cetera. So you make that out of full of composites, things like fiberglass and resin and foams, especially towards the end of the turbine blade, the tip of the blade, you use a lot of high compressive foams. But at the base of the blade, the balsa wood works much better because it has higher compressive and shear strength. But if our material, if it absorbs too much resin, it becomes very heavy. So it becomes more expensive. So we work with, I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, it's actually a joint development partnership. And in some cases, like with Gurit, a written 14-page agreement on terms of, excuse me, in terms of what we're going to make at what price point, and then how much can we make of it. So one of our problems, one of the challenges, quite frankly, of INCA renewable technologies is that we can't start small. Our customers are at Toyota or at, let's say, Winnebago. If they use, Winnebago uses themselves 40 million board feet of plywood a year. And if we can only make 1 million, they don't care. They can't use it. They can't spec you in. It's not enough. So we actually, the challenge with us is that we have to scale very quickly, which costs a lot of money. And in this particular market, capital has been tough. This has been a very, very difficult period of time this last year. You know, when interest rates went up, that means all the private equity funds that depend on borrowing money to create, they went pencils down. When Silicon Valley Bank went down, that was an indication that the venture capital funds went down. I mean, last year was the lowest VC activity year in decades. And so, you know, I'm not whining. I'm just saying that one of the real challenges in doing what I do for a living, and the reason why I have this gray hair, is that it's very challenging to come up with all of this work and IP and customers, but then you still have to go raise, you know, tens of millions of dollars to build your factories. And fortunately, in Canada, we've gotten a tremendous amount of support to do that. And I'm flying out today in an hour and a half to go to the Alberta Hemp Alliance conference. I'm speaking there. But the support we've gotten from government, support we've gotten from industry has been really gratifying in the prairie.
Does anybody else have another question? You know, I'll have 100.
Well, Jason knows my whole story. He was actually, he and I had a chance to be together. He was on a trip and managed to stop by our house on his way into Alberta, actually, right, Jason? You were heading up?
Yes, yes, that was back in what, September, October time. So great to see you again. Always a pleasure to learn from you, David. I did have a few questions, and I'll start. One of the things I didn't know was your background with entertainment entertainment network, and so I knew that you had gone to film school, but I didn't realize that you were connected to that. I'm curious if you interacted with a gentleman and a lawyer by the name of Kip Fry. He was the house attorney for TNT.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he had the Heritage Group Accelerator Program, their venture arm, and that's who made an investment in Zilla. So I met Kip and interacted with them, and still have support from the Heritage Group. So what a small world.
Fantastic. Well, say hi. I mean, I haven't seen him in decades, but that's phenomenal.
Yes, and then in Ashley's very eloquent introduction of you, she did leave out that JEC award. I'm sure there's many other awards that you have also won. And Zilla is trying to follow in your footsteps. As you know, we're a top 20 finalist at JEC World Startup Booster this year. So trying to follow in your footsteps. I'm curious if I thought I saw your name on the agenda for one of the talks up on the stage. Are you going to be presenting at JEC World this year?
Yeah,
or?
they asked me to speak, but I can't. I just can't. And listen, I hate turning down a trip to Paris. Just for the interest of the rest of the listeners, the largest composite show on earth happens every year in Paris, and it's called JEC World, if you look them up. But it's a massive composite show. I mean, the judges that will sit on Jason's panel judging his bio-based epoxy venture are like Airbus and Mercedes and, you know, Beneteau boats. So you really don't have a lot of wiggle room to jive these guys. They're world experts in composites. But I wish you well there. It's a phenomenal program. And I just can't get there because I'm in the middle of this capital raise and I've got to focus on it. So Camille's not happy that we're not going, but
Yeah,
I'll
I'm
have to,
sure.
I'll have to live with that.
So that was my other question. Last time I stopped by and visited your lovely home, that you were working on that capital close. I don't know if you made any progress. Have you been able to acquire the plant in Indiana? How are you doing on your fundraising so far?
Well, we're in deep due diligence. I will tell you that, with a couple of funds that are really good funds. It's been quite a ride. We've made, just to give you a sense of what it is to be an entrepreneur for the rest of the group. I mean, like Jason knows, in this past 9 months, I've made 121 presentations to real funds. So these are private equity funds, these are venture capital funds, what they call family offices. There are families that have tremendous wealth and they actually manage their own investments, like the Porsche family office. It's called B-Scope, et cetera. And so you just got to keep pushing it up the hill. And I'm hoping to have some announcements in the very near future, but I need to really pay attention to the capital close. Yeah. And
Okay.
the nice thing is there's lots of non-dilutive capital. I know you've taken advantage of some of that, Jason, in terms of government grants, which are very important to an entrepreneur, and also low interest loans. Like we have a lining up a loan with the Agricultural Finance Service Corporation, which is basically a Crown bank supporting ag tech projects. That debt is very important. You want to layer on a combination of debt and equity when you're building a company. It's a healthy thing to do. It's better for shareholders. So yeah, feel free to, I'll take a look at your new deck. Happy to look at the presentation you're going to give in Paris. And I wish you well. I know you'll do well there. And you're going to meet a ton of people. Like, just get ready to be barraged. It's great.
Absolutely. I'm taking a couple of folks with me from my team, so
Can I
Good.
be on your
Good.
team?
Yeah.
Last
Ashley, you
question,
can be
David.
on my team. Ashley is she's so good at what she does. Like, yes, you and I will talk later.
I have another question for you though, because as we were kind of layering in housing and all of these other applications in use, besides that industrial application, are there emerging areas or industries where biocomposite materials show particular promise? And how does INCA intend to explore the new application of these products?
Yes. I mean, for example, that panel product that they're going to make, RV sidewalls, what they do is they take a very thin sheet of plywood, they put then a layer of urethane foam in the middle, and then another sheet of plywood. That urethane foam creates a stress skin panel, which makes it strong enough to hold up in an RV, in a recreational vehicle. But the foam actually serves as insulation as well, right? So that's how you make a sidewall. Then you cut your windows and doors, and there you go. That panel product, we believe, has tremendous applications in low cost panelized housing systems. And I think very unfortunately, when you have 2 million people displaced in Gaza, and you have 60 million diaspora around the world, the idea of creating affordable, rapidly deployable, environmentally efficient shelter systems is
Tiny
very
homes.
homes. I see a big opportunity there. In the injection plastics, it's sort of everything all the time, right? It's everything that you see around you that's glass reinforced polymers that has possibilities. And then there's other really cool applications, not to embarrass Jason again, but for example, he's dealing with his materials in places like Burton for snowboards and Atomic for skis, and they want pre-pregs. So they want pre-preg, a material like a natural fiber composite, but with an epoxy resin in it. So it's a thermal set resin, because how hard we are on our skis and our snowboards. So there's tremendous opportunities in industry for these materials. But when you're an entrepreneur and you're getting launched, you really want to focus on sort of a key industrial segment for your product, or for each of your products, a key industrial segment where someone can identify, where you can identify a customer, a need, a proven technology, and that's how you sort of get started. And then you can move sideways. We are already asked to, once INCA's up and running in North America, to be in Europe, to be in Latin America, South Africa, and Asia, and in India now. Big Indian companies, we're signing a joint development agreement for turbine blades in India. In those countries, other applications will be more relevant to them. So you adjust per what makes sense. I also should say that at INCA, we're fiber agnostic. So we have in our past utilized hemp, jute, knaf, which is a really interesting plant, similar to hemp, actually related genomically to hemp. So around the world, like in India, it's not legal to grow hemp yet, but jute is a huge crop. So we'll utilize jute there. In Africa, there's a big push to bring hemp back. It grows wild in Africa. It's called stockroos, which is sort of a rooty stalk, as they call it, a stockroos. But it grows all over the place. So it's very easy to cultivate hemp successfully. And some of you may know they have a huge automotive industry. I mean, Toyota manufactures cars there, as does BMW and Ford and Mitsubishi. So, you sort of have to, as I said before, replicable models. Look for ways to build something that has great environmental impact, positive environmental attributes, and then replicate it.
Brilliant. Any more questions?
I had a follow-up question on the funding. You talked about bad guys, David, and the petroleum industry that we're up against with their 100-year head start. I'm curious about fundraising, taking money from, all of these huge petroleum-based corporations are like throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. They all have, their green funds and sustainable investments, and they're throwing money around, just kind of like feeling out the waters while they're still milking the cash cow as they can, right? Until, as you pointed out explicitly, until economically it makes sense to switch, right? And so they're not just going to switch because it's good for the planet, right? And so what about taking funding from those? How do you hold that balance of the people that have the large capital that are still making capital from the old economic system, and we need that capital for the new economic system? How do you walk that balance?
Yeah,
Great
I think that's
question.
life. I mean, I think it's life. I think that in order to be transformative of industry and transformative of economies and the powers that control economies, you have to interact with them. You have to interact with them. And I think that in our fundraising, we've focused on ESG funds. I mean, we have really looked at environmental funds or family offices that are committed, right? The kids are now running them. They want to go hemp. I mean, they're trying to really, because at the end of the day, those are the people who are going to sit on your board of directors. Your investors are going to be your board, and you want to make sure that everyone's interests are truly aligned. So I would say to entrepreneurs out there, as long as it's not a capture and kill scenario, which does happen. I'm
Happens
here
in
to
media
tell you,
all the time.
it happens in industry all the time too, and people don't recognize it, but there's a lot of that goes on. So as long as you feel that the interests are aligned and that the goal is to be responsible to shareholders, return to shareholders, generating return to your investors, and you have the internal discipline to do that, meaning your own governance within your organization, then I think you're okay. I think where people get in trouble is where there's something where, you know, a big company goes, you know, this is a potential real big competitor. We're going to invest here, and then we're sort of going to let it slowly die on the vine. That you have to be careful of. And to that, Jason, I say, you know, take the money, baby. I mean, you got to get the business going, because my feeling is once the cat's out of the bag, it's just out, the genie's out, you know, like it's happening and you're cost competitive and, you know, you're making money for people. I think it becomes a public relations nightmare to then hurt you. Right?
Well, wonderful. Thank you for that. And leaving on that wonderful pearl of wisdom, again, David Saltman, everybody, thank you for being here. Now, David, I know that people watching after the fact are going to want to know how to get in contact with you. Would you like to give them some information on that?
Sure, you can just get me at INCA Renewtech.com, you guys. So it's just D Saltman at INCA Renewtech.com. And there's a pretty in-depth website. There's a lot of materials and there's a lot of press stuff out there. But my head's kind of been in the sand. We've been doing a lot less publicity recently and a lot more just pounding the pavement to shake the money trees and get this thing going. We're right at that magic moment where, you know, we just need the liquidity. All the facilities are designed. We're ready to go. But people are welcome to reach out to me at any time. I'm pretty responsive. I'm not big on social media, so you can get me on LinkedIn, but you know, it'll take a couple weeks but I have no problem with emails. I'm not going to give you my cell phone number, but if you have to have it, Ashley can supply it with you.
Yes, you can always contact me. My email is aanthony@climatereality.ca. And again, so much gratitude for you being here with us, David. And of course, to all of our guests that were able to join and all of those who are viewing afterwards. Can't wait until the next one. So until then, without further ado, I'd like to say all that gratitude to carry with you throughout your travels today. And of course, Jason, and into Paris while you're pitching that next big venture yourself. Maybe we'll have you supporting some of our innovation speaker series and questioning those and critiquing those dominant ways of knowing, being, and doing with some incredible opportunities for resins, biocomposites, all of the things that could change our tomorrow. So thank you again to everybody, and I hope that you have a great day.
Thank you, Ashley.